people on YouTube. Let's go live on Instagram. I didn't realize I can go live on YouTube on my phone. You learn something new every day, don't you? Okay, so on my... Oh, it's the wrong way on my... Okay, on my Instagram, people, friends, thank you. Good to see you. I'm also on YouTube on the other channel over on this side. So I've been reading on my Instagram this incredible book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., New York Times best-selling author. And it's he started the Children's Defense Fund, so it's published by the Children's Defense Fund. All the proceeds of the book go to the Children's Defense Fund. And I've been reading the introduction, and I can't remember how far I read on Instagram, because I also did it on Facebook, and I also did it on a couple other sites that I'm on. But I'm going to go to introduction. Okay, I'm going to go to, let's see where I left off about. Okay, so he talks about the death rates. We've had the highest death rates of anyone in the world per million. So the lowest is on his list, Tanzania with 0.86 deaths per million. Above that, China, 3 deaths per million. Now that could be totally because China doesn't report all the death cases, but they had really strict, harsh lockdowns. Next above that is 28 deaths per million. Congo has 35 deaths per million. South Korea has 47 deaths per million. Kenya has 97 deaths per million. Pakistan, 128 deaths per million. This is all from what they believe was deaths by COVID. But, of course, he talks about how many false positives the testings had, and how doctors and hospitals were incentivized to count people that died of COVID when they didn't die of COVID. They died with COVID. They died of other complications. Like if they came in with a gunshot wound to their head and they're dead and they're laying there, and they can test their body and say, oh, inside this dead body there's COVID. Okay. The hospital gets $4,000, $5,000 more dollars per patient if we say it's a COVID death, as they do if it's not a COVID death. So they obviously, for financial gain, a lot of the ones in the U.S. and places that follow such a system have a higher death count. So this is just with knowing all those inconsistencies and lying governments that lie about the death count to promote a narrative one way or the other. Pakistan has 128 deaths per million. This was as of the publishing. Oh, this was in the first year of the pandemic. Japan had 139 deaths per million. Above that, Norway, 161. Above that, Vietnam, 197 per million. Finland, 194. So it keeps going up. Jamaica, India, Denmark, Jamaica, Cuba. So Cuba has 3 times per million that Japan has. But Germany has more than that, 1,126 million. Iran has more than Germany with 1,449 per million. Sweden, 1,444 per million. But ding, 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 ding. The winner, all-time champion like they always are, America. We were able to kill more people during the pandemic in the first year and say they died of COVID, not with COVID. And we have 2,107 deaths per million. So only one lower on this list is almost half of what we had. People like Japan, they had almost a tenth of what we had per million. This is just in the first year. Okay, and he talks about how Anthony Fauci, he's the highest paid of all the public employees of the U.S. government, 400 and something thousand. Plus he's paid royalties for every vaccine he can convince us to take, because he owns the patent rights of many of the vaccines and many of the medicines that NIH promotes, because the NIH received the taxpayer money to have a corporation do testing on it. And so that corporation get a percentage, he can get a percentage, he can patent it, because it was an NIH study, and he, as an employee of the NIH, should get patent rights of everything. That's just like me working for, let's say I work for Walmart, which I've never worked for. And if Walmart discovers how to make some invention, I should get a kickback because I'm an employee of. Well, that would be a perfectly communist system, where if it were really communist, there's never been a communist system, where the reason why a lot of people were against Huawei is because it was one of the first workers' co-ops, IT co-ops in a communist country, where they voted for who was the president of the company, who was the CEO, who was the financial officers, everything. It was voted by the employees, so it was a completely. That's why we were so much against Huawei. But anyway, that's a whole another story. I'm talking about the NIH and the terrible history of Dr. Anthony Fauci running it for the last 50 years, and how he lists all. As Dr. Fauci's run for the last 50 years, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and he also ran the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, which NIAID. Under all of his tenure, I should call it, what should I call it? Under his tutelage. I can't even say any words. I got some teeth removed back here, and it's been affecting my way I speak. I almost have a lisp sometimes because my tongue isn't used to yet using all the teeth that are there. Okay. But anyway, he goes on to talk about the cost of the quarantine, which is the destruction of the whole U.S. economy. And now Dr. Fauci, every time he's moved up in the corporations, in the CDC and the NIH, it was always because he failed at something before. So he's failed upward. And he's the main seller of pharmaceutical products in the world. And he's the main funder of all the research of all the labs. So if any lab around the world wants to research something that goes against his narrative about what should or shouldn't be taken during the pandemic, or what shouldn't have been talked about, like vitamin D, which would have saved a lot of people's lives, like many World Health Organization known cures for a lot of things, and a lot of things I got kicked off of YouTube for. Oh, I didn't get kicked off of YouTube. I got my video's been held in suspended animation for over 2 years because they say it's dangerous, and they won't review it because they know it's not dangerous. And they recently took down some of my videos of my original songs because they said they were promoting violence. I don't know how a peace activist, Buddhist scholar, and historian who believes in social justice and peace can be promoting violence with their songs, but that's how the fake fact checkers now on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all the other sites run by the major cabals that are pushing the pandemic and the scamdemic operate. So I'm just going to read. I'm going to read the beginning of it, introduction, until I get called to work. I didn't hear did I get a call for work? Hold on. I'm going to stop this video for a second just to check. Okay, I gotta get my other one going. No, it still says to wait outside. Okay, I'm good. New reserve block. Okay, hold on. Let me get this new reserve block. Offer. No, I don't want that one. Okay, back to the drawing board. Okay, I'm unpausing my. Reconnecting with Instagram, and you guys are there with YouTube. Okay, so the introduction of this great book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health by Robert F. Kennedy, which is the son of Robert F. Kennedy, who got killed when he ran for president, who was the Attorney General of John F. Kennedy, who also got killed because of his policies and his outspokenness against the cabal that's now taken over the government and destroyed every person's economy except the rich fat cats. Okay, so from the introduction, first he does a quote from John Abramson, MD, Harvard Medical School. It says, the first step is to give up the illusion that the primary purpose of modern medicine research is to improve America's health most effectively and efficiently. In our opinion, the primary purpose of commercially funded clinical research is to maximize financial return on investment, not health. So the whole industry of pharmacology and the cult of pharmacology, and what in this book over here that I was reading also on my Instagram page, which you got to go back and listen to, says, he calls it the National Security Crime Syndicate. The book I'm thinking of, and I don't want to pick it up, is The COVID Coup by Leonard Horowitz, which I started reading on my Instagram and Facebook accounts. And I'm going to start doing on YouTube and other Rumble and all those other sites. Okay, I wrote this book to help Americans and citizens across the globe understand the historical underpinnings of the bewildering cataclysm that began in 2020. In that single annus horribilis, which means the most horrible year, liberal democracy effectively collapsed worldwide. So he says all democracies around the world collapsed on 2020 when they all decided to go against the constitutions and lock their citizens in their homes and deny them all their basic rights of freedom and liberty. He says, the very governmental health regulators, social media eminences, and media companies that idealistic populations relied upon as champions of freedom, health, democracy, civil rights, and evidence-based public policy seem to collectively pivot in a lockstep assault against free speech and personal freedom. So I felt this right at the beginning of the pandemic. Before they even started the lockdown, they started deleting videos on YouTube for MMS, which is not dangerous, which has been known around the world, and which the former president of the United States, which I didn't vote for and I won't vote for if he runs for again, and I didn't vote for him the second time he ran, even though my Instagram first got shadow banned because of a joking video I made about voting for him, which if you didn't listen to the video, you would have, if you would have listened to the video, you would know it was a joke. I was being a stand-down comic like I am. But that's when my shadow banning first started on Facebook in 2015 or 16, when I jokingly said I was going to vote for the orange man. And it was a joke. And I made it abundantly clear to anyone who listened to the video that it was a joke, but people that don't understand dark comedy stupidly, or their algorithms, started demonetizing a lot of my videos, just deleting a lot of my videos. But this former orange guy that I didn't vote for, he said in one of his interviews, he was saying there's a detergent that can clear this all out. And what he was trying to say, and he doesn't have a clear memory, is MMS, Miracle Mineral Solution, or Miracle Mineral Supplement, which is the video that YouTube is holding for 2 years in review and saying it's dangerous, which is not, because it was up for 7 years on my account. So were thousands of videos of it around the world on everyone's accounts. Anyone had to do with public health, actual real health, like energy healers like myself, not sick care or sick. We should call the medical establishment that relies on the cult of pharmacology as what it is. It's sick maintenance. They maintain your sickness. You get one drug and then you get to take another drug because that drug causes side effects. And then you got to take another drug for the second drug you took for this first drug side effects, so that you can get rid of those side effects. So it creates another side effect that you have to take another drug. So you just forever just going to the pharmacy and just having all these pills and things, and none of them actually work to do anything productively because they took them all and patented them. And we'll talk about patents later. Let's go on. Suddenly, those trusted institutions seem to be acting in concert to generate fear, promote obedience, discourage critical thinking, and herd 7 billion people to march to a single tune, culminating in mass public health experiments with a novel, shoddily tested, and improperly licensed technology so risky that manufacturers refuse to produce it unless every government on earth shielded them from liability. So before any of these mRNA vaccines, which haven't been properly tested, he says shoddily tested, and he says in his, if you go on to his Defender podcast on Spotify, RFK Jr.'s Defender podcast, he says it's never been double-blind tested, and nor has any of the vaccines in the history of the United States ever been double-blind tested. And why double-blind test them? When they have been shielded from liability. So anything that happens to anyone who takes their so-called vaccines, and I'm not promoting vaccine hesitancy, nor am I anti-vax. I'm just anti-science, which Tony Fauci is anti-science because he never will ever quote a study when he says the science says, and nor will the guy with the face like this, constant face like this, who talks like Kermit the Frog, who wants to kill millions of people with his deadly weapons, the one who stole all the technology that created Windows, who patented other people's research and then called it his own. Won't say his name because that'll get us blocked, but anyway. So they were so in order for them to be passed, for them to be, quote, up and down the chain of commands passed to be safe and effective, they had to guarantee that all the companies that are making these vaccines, which were paid to make the vaccines by the public trough, which is our welfare money that we put in to help us, not help the corporations, and they gained millions of dollars. We didn't gain anything from it. We just gained bad health if we were stupid enough to take the poisons that they created, which haven't been tested. So in order for them to license it, they said they want every single government in the world to indemnify the companies that make the vaccines, so that if anyone dies, anyone has bad health, people like Eric Clapton, who can no longer play his guitar, they cannot sue the companies that were paid to create the vaccines by our public welfare money. That they always say they don't like public welfare. They like it when the rich get welfare, but they don't like it when actual people like me and you get welfare that don't make millions of dollars per year or month. Okay. But as you will see, the evidence speaks for itself. Oh, I think I jumped a little bit. Okay, so this multi-million-dollar vaccine, Americans' naive idealism will make them reluctant to believe that their government's COVID policies were so grotesquely ill-conceived, so unfounded in science, so tethered to financial interests that they caused hundreds of thousands of wholly unnecessary deaths. But as you will see below, the evidence speaks for itself. I skipped somewhere. Okay, medicines were available against COVID. Inexpensive, safe medicines that would have prevented hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations and saved as many lives if only we'd use them in this country. So Dr. Fauci made sure we didn't use any of the medicines that would have worked to save people's lives, like ivermectin and hydrochloroquine, and even better one, MMS, Miracle Mineral Solution, which was everyone's accounts that had it on theirs were deleted right before the lockdowns, which means that they were in lockstep before we even knew that it was a lockstep march into stupiddom. Peer-reviewed science offers anemic, if any, support for masking, quarantines, and social distancing. So there's almost no study that says that this worked, but there's a lot of studies that say they don't work. And Dr. Fauci offered no citation or justification to support his diktats. So every time he says anything, he never will ever quote a study. He says the science says, and so does Bill Gates, Doctor of Death, which one of my mentors, I was going to say Dr. Here, but that's, yeah, he's his mentor, so he's my mentor too. My friend is your friend, my enemies, your enemy's my friend. How does that go? Anyway, not Dr. Here, but founder of Access Consciousness, Gary Douglas, who's not a doctor, said this. He said this in 2016, I think, 2015. And I didn't even know Bill Gates, his dirty, dark history until the pandemic, but he said in 2016 that Bill Gates is the reincarnation of Hitler. And now that I know what he means, I can see where he was coming from. And I don't support anything that's in this book. I don't support anything that my mentor said. Those are all independent thoughts because we're independent free thinkers. And I'm just a stand-down comic. And I'm just relaying what other people say. So you the listener can tell me what you think in the comments below, because I have no opinions. I can't have an opinion because I'm a content creator and we can't have opinions unless it's approved by the CDC to have opinions. Because we can't do critical thinking against the law now, or against the policies, the community guidelines of these dictatorial regimes that don't give us any reason for deleting our accounts. And you know who you're talking about, who deleted my accounts. So, peer-reviewed science offers endemic, if any, support for masking, quarantines, and social distancing. And Dr. Fauci offered no citations or justifications to support his diktats. Both common sense and the weight of scientific evidence suggest that all these strategies and unquestionable shutting down the global economy caused far more injuries and deaths than they averted. So because we listened to Dr. Death, this guy, and the other Dr. Death, the other guy that I named earlier that I'm not going to name again, the guy who sounds like Kermit the Frog, who always has a, you can't tell if he's smiling or if he's frowning. He always has this look on his face. When he he seems to get excited and animated when he talks about how many people are going to die of this and that. But then when unfortunately, the Omicron variant was a better vaccine than we could have created, because he knows, as all science would know if he would actually quote science. He never quotes science. But he knows the science is out there that if you have natural immunity like me, who has had the pandemic, scandemic 3 times, if that I'm fully immune, more than anyone could be fully immune to this bullshit. Dr. Fauci was clearly aware that his mask decree were contrary to overwhelming science. So this is the guy who says I'm the word of science, who goes against science and never quotes science when he speaks. In July 2020, after switching course to recommend national mask mandates, Dr. Fauci and Nora O'Donnell with InStyle magazine that his earlier dismissal of masks efficiently was correct in the context of the time in which I said it, unquote, and that he intended to prevent a consumer run on masks that might jeopardize their availability to frontline responders. But Dr. Fauci's emails reveal that he was giving the same advice privately. Moreover, his detailed explanation to the public and to high-level health regulators indicate he genuinely believed that ordinary masks had little to no efficiency against viral infection. So he knew they didn't work, and he lied to the public saying don't use them, because he was acting like he did believe they worked for frontline workers. So he didn't want you to get them at the beginning because he wanted the frontliners to get them because he believed they work, but at the same time he believes they don't work, or he knows that the science supports that they don't work. That's why he never quotes any scientific study to show that masking works. But okay, so he's talking about his emails that totally tell what he's saying in the public, and his little speeches, which are sales pitches for his pharmaceutical cabals, otherwise known by the author of the book I'm going to read later and I read before as the National Security Crime Syndicate. In a February 5, 2020 email, for example, he advised his putative former boss, President Obama's Health and Human Service Secretary, Sylvia Burwell, on the futility of masking the healthy. On February 17th, he invoked the same rationale in an interview with USA Today. So here's the interview and what he said. A mask is much more appropriate for someone who is infected and you're trying to prevent them from infecting other people than it is in protecting you against infection. If you look at the mask that you buy in your drugstore, the leakage around that doesn't really do much to protect you. Now, in the United States, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to wear a mask. And he puts the footnote of this. This was from February 17th, I guess, of 2020. During the February 28th speech to HHS regulators, Human Health Services, he explained the fruitlessness of masking asymptomatic people. He says, the one thing historically people need to realize that even if there is some asymptomatic transmission in all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, not the RNA ones that were created by Bethesda, Maryland laboratories to create HIV, which were put into this one that created the COVID 19. We won't talk about that. The driver of outbreaks is always a symptomatic person. So if you're asymptomatic, he said at the beginning, just like he said in all history, which all evidence shows scientifically, asymptomatic people, that means they have no symptoms, they're not going to be carrying something. But this is the whole lie. Oh, you're asymptomatic, now you got to lock down even more because now you're super dangerous. Or if you had the virus before and you're not going to take a shot, experimental biological agent that hasn't been properly tested and has only been licensed with the understanding that every government in the world would shield them from liability for any harm they cause, which is more harm than the virus did as of the second year of the pandemic, scamdemic. Even if there's a rare asymptomatic person that might transmit, an epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers. So he's going to lie later on about this. Consistent with Dr. Fauci's earlier statements, the peer-reviewed scientific literature has steadfastly refused to support masking the healthy as an effective barrier to viral spread. And Dr. Fauci offered a citation to justify this change of heart. So he actually quoted science, even though this author says he never quotes science. So maybe he does occasionally if it works to his justification, quote science, maybe. A December 2020 comprehensive study of 10 million Wuhan residents confirmed Fauci's January 28, 2020 assertion that asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19 is infinitesimally rare, almost infinitely rare. Furthermore, some 25 studies, all available on NIH websites, find that ordinary masking using less than an N95 respirator doesn't reduce viral infection rates, even surprisingly in institutional settings like hospitals and surgical theaters. Moreover, some 25 additional studies attribute to masking a grim retinue of harms. So if you mask, you cause more harms than you do benefits, just like the experimental biological agents that they're calling a VACIN, whatever the rest of the letters are, which is not really one of those, because that's a term that they created to call it that, to lie to you, to make you take it when you shouldn't have to take it because it's not required, nor does it help you. Moreover, some 20... Okay, we already read that one. 14 of these studies are randomized, peer-reviewed placebo studies. And he explains why none of the VANC whatevers have ever been placebo double-blind peer-reviewed studies. There is no well-constructed study that persuasively suggests masks have convincing efficacy against COVID-19 that would justify accepting the harms associated with masks. So the harms that are associated with masks are so much more than any possible benefit from wearing them that he should be thrown in jail just for requiring them later on, when he realized at the beginning and said at the beginning, truthfully, finally, that you don't need them. You shouldn't take them. Okay, finally, Retrospective studies on Dr. Fauci's mask mandates confirmed that they were bootless. Quote, regional analysis in the United States does not show that masks mandates had any effect on case rates despite 93% compliance. Moreover, according to CDC data, 85% of people who contracted COVID-19 reported wearing a mask. And that's the end quote of that? My eyes are bad. Yeah, okay. And he cites that, according to Guten Tag. So this is on a Guten Tag website. Dr. Fauci observed in March 2020 that a mask's only real efficacy may be in, quote, making people feel a little better, end quote. Perhaps he recognized that what masking lacked in efficacy against contagion, it compensated for with powerful psychological effects. These symbolic powers demonstrated strategic benefits for the larger enterprise of encouraging public compliance with draconian medical mandates. Dr. Fauci's switch to endorsing masks after first recommending against them came at a time of increasing political polarization, and masks quickly became important tribal badges, signals of rectitude for those who embrace Dr. Fauci, and the stigmata of blind obedience to underserving authority among those who balked. B-A-L-K. I can never say that word. They balked at it. They said, no, thank you. Moreover, masking, by amplifying everyone's fear, helped inoculate the public against critical thinking by serving as persistent reminders that each of our fellow citizens was a potentially dangerous and germ-infected threat to us. Masks increased social isolation and fostered divisions and fractionalization, thereby impeding organized political resistance. The impact of masking on the national psyche reminded me of the subtle contribution of the duck and cover drills of my youth, drills that sustained and cemented the militaristic ideology of the Cold War. So little kids were told, duck and cover. So if a big nuclear bomb comes, you just get under your desk and you cover your head. Or if you're walking down the street, you get next to the curb and duck and cover. Or you get under a doorway, and that would somehow help you the fallout of the radiation of the nuclear Cold War that was going to happen inevitably because we were all against each other. There's no way for the East and the West to live together, because it's basically the idea that people should live in a communal setting with the idea that people should be individuals and just dog eat dog, eat the poor people alive like they do in the so-called democracies. Not that they don't do worse in the totalitarian regimes which falsely called themselves communist or socialist, which none of them were. Tito's Yugoslavia was the only one that was almost democratic socialism. So that's the only experiment. Now, I would go with Denmark or Sweden for the only real socialist country, democratic socialist countries on the earth. But anyway, that's a whole study for another. You got to go watch my YouTube video on the socialism versus Marxism versus communism versus capitalism versus marketeerism. Oh, finally, I got 4 stops. 22 packages. Okay, kids, looks like I gotta go to work. See you cats later. How do I stop this thing?